Well, hello peeps. So today we're gonna be talking about how we can actually make the queues better in WoW PvP, and I'm gonna start off this with saying that the healer players are right about one thing in this game. We also are gonna be discussing tanks in PvP and where they should be, what position they should take in PvP, because in my opinion I feel like tanks are just kind of excluded from PvP almost intentionally, right? Instead of actually Blizzard thinking about how tanks should be balanced and how they should function in PvP. On the topic of healers, I also must add that I disagree with the sentiment that rewards are the issues why there are no healers queuing. And this is for several reasons, but I realized that there might be a reward that DPS players might actually be interested in. So first things first, I gotta kind of thank you to my chain of thoughts. I was queuing some Dota 2 the other day, and I realized I'm running low on role queue tokens. Now for the uninitiated, Dota 2 has role queue tokens for its ranked mode. You acquire tokens by playing the least preferred roles or just selecting to play all the roles. Obviously, then you can use the role queue tokens to play your desired role. League has a similar system, it's more automatic. You will here and there get autofilled in a role you didn't choose to play and be protected from autofill after you complete that match. I definitely think that the Dota system is a little bit more clear-cut and more understandable, but you also would have to, I think, to play more of the least preferred roles, right? In League it does happen randomly and sometimes very unexpectedly, but it also happens like once in 2-3 days, right? You're just constantly queuing the role you actually want without actually ever having to play like the autofill positions. Now I feel like I have to talk about why I don't think rewards by themselves are the answer for healer players. First of all, we're not trying to simply make healer players want to play healer, we're trying to make DPS players want to queue healer, right? The other thing is, I just feel like trying to incentivize people to play a certain position or role with like rewards and whatnot is the wrong way to go about it. You should want people to play the role because it's fun, right? And sure, sometimes that role is still gonna be less preferred, but you still gotta make sure it's fun. Both League and Dota had this exact same problem with supports, but they actively worked on the quality of life of supports, actively worked on the itemization of supports and a lot of different things to actually make supports at a certain point in time the most favored and most preferred role. So I think that is something that really Blizzard needs to try and do, specifically for PvP. Like, they really need to work on making healer more fun and more engaging and feeling like the healers have more impact other than just being a freaking heal bot, right? So that is why I disagree with rewards kind of like as a general thing, right? I don't think rewards, especially like of like gold, transmog and such, is gonna motivate specifically the DPS players to play healer, right? But what if we had some kind of a system like the role queue tokens from Dota or something like that? That is a reward that I might want to queue up some healer for, right? If I can guarantee myself some quick DPS queues, or let's call them priority DPS queues, right? Then yeah, I think I am gonna play some healer. Generally speaking, I don't really mind playing some healer, I have enjoyed it, but it's more of a like playing with friends and, you know, kind of a chill thing for me, right? It's not really something I play seriously. So I personally would definitely queue up some healer if we had some kind of a role queue system, right? Where I queue up some healer. Okay, I played 5 games of healer. Now I have 5 games of priority queue on my DPS. And again, you can kind of prove me if I'm wrong, but I really think nobody would care for any kind of rewards as transmogs. Even like a mount, I feel like only a section of people would care for. Gold, I also think only like a section of people would maybe care for. But if you would actually have some fast queues on your DPS, that might be something people are interested. Especially me, I am definitely right now interested in some fast queues. But before I let you get on with the video, I do have to inform you that only 4.3% of you subscribed. So if you have been enjoying the content, please consider smashing that subscribe button. Now lately, YouTube is restricting most of my videos for some reason, maybe because of my potty mouth, but regardless, if you want to keep up with the current Mikadika content, do consider smashing that notification bell. And I guess a little bit of a hot take, if I was the developer right now, I would be definitely looking at making healers more of a supportive role rather than just pure healing. Healing should stay a part of it, but healers should really have some powerful control and supportive abilities. And I will give you a few examples. For healer priests, let's say you make Leap of Fate like a 30-second cooldown, making priests excel at moving their teammates out of harm's way, while they themselves are not as mobile and need help moving around. Make the rest of Shaman's Lightning Last should be like 20% longer than the DPS version and do significant damage, making the rest of Shamans having really good kill control and having to be actually controlled themselves so they can't really pull off this, right, Giga control the person move that also deals significant amount of damage. The main thing is basically to differentiate healers from their DPS counterparts, right? Enhancement and Elemental should not have as much control, right, as Resto, and obviously like Shadow should not be able to move its teammates around as much as the healer versions can. Or maybe in this role Shadow should not be even able to do it at all. I also will be looking at the percentage of healing that comes from healers versus self-sustain of DPS. Right now, I would put it at like 95 to 5% depending on your class. I would definitely be trying to make this more like 70-30%. Obviously, for this to happen, we would need to reduce a little bit of the healing from healers and increase the healing in the self-sustain of DPS. Now, this kind of goes against the philosophy of the War Within, where we kind of increase the healing rate of healers and decrease the self-sustain, but I feel like that was very much motivated by Mythic Plus and just in generally the PvE environment. So very much a PvE focused right change or a philosophy change that should have not really went through in PvP, right? I feel like that should have just not been in PvP. I feel like they need to have completely two different philosophies when it comes to healers in PvE and healers in PvP. Now, on the topic of tanks, I personally feel like tanks are just forgotten, generally speaking, in PvP. By most, they're also hated, but I think that is really the fault of Blizzard having tanks be insane a few times, and also Blizzard's implementation of tanks in PvP. Or should I say the lack of implementation, since they never really had an idea for what they wanted tanks to be other than flag carriers. I think that is really a big part of it, and also just the PvE design of tanks. Tanks are designed to take a lot of damage, right, have a lot of defenses, while also actually dishing out damage. And obviously control is not a big part of that equation, since, right, you don't really have to CC your bosses in PvE. I think these two things kind of combine to make the situation where tanks, when they're actually good in PvP, they're just a better DPS, right? They do more damage than the DPS, and they're also just much tankier, right, than the DPS. And obviously a lot has to do with homogenization of the game and, right, control just being kind of PvE focused in the game, right? Every class has control, and basically tanks are not really differentiated in that way. But for me, this definitely feels like that wasted potential, and I must say I am biased. I really like playing tanks in MOBA games, and it's also pretty much the reason why I'm talking about this. I've been just enjoying a lot of tanks lately in my MOBA games, and now there's no like that control-y, tanky, berserk character that still can do damage but relies on controlling opponents for the team, or just does damage so it has to be dealt with. This definitely has to do with the homogenization of the game, since I used to get this feeling on the warrior back in the day. You didn't really have the mobility, you didn't really have much control, but you were tanky, and when you got on your enemies, you slaughtered them. A true juggernaut experience. And also I think it's good to add that like protection had its own identity as well, specifically talking about Wrath of the Lich King. Arms was high damage, kind of constant damage, very slow moving, and you didn't want arms to ever be on you. Protection, on the other hand, was much more mobile, more relied on bursts of damage, and was obviously tankier since it is protection. But this is just something that was unfortunately lost over time, where specs used to have this identity in PvP. Definitely I'm biased a little bit, but I feel like tanks could have like an identity in PvP. They could even differentiate each tank to make each tank kind of have like a position they fulfill in PvP. For example, let's say Blood DKs are the tank that actually like deals damage and has to like be controlled and dealt with. Something like Protection Warrior is going to be a lot better at helping their teammates out, right, protecting their teammates, while also controlling the enemy team. Something like Protection Paladin is, right, all about protecting their teammates, right, and keeping them alive, helping them survive. But as long as they are neglected by Blizzard, they're just gonna be coming in and out of meta based on tunings, like arbitrary things. Like there's not a conscious, right, goal to make tanks good in PvP, just something that happens naturally based on PvE tunings. All of a sudden, Blood Death Knight deals a lot of freaking damage and is actually meta and actually really good in PvP. But was that like actually the goal of the tunings? Obviously not. So peeps, tell me down below how you feel about today's suggestions. At this point, it is clear that healers are right about the lack of healers being the main source of high Q times. And I think WoW could benefit from a system like Dota or League has. A priority Q system, let's call it. On the other hand, transmogs, mounts, gold and such are just not a good enough incentive for DPS players to play healer. At least for me personally, this is something that's not gonna be pushing me into the healing position. Healers should be more impactful in PvP and have more options other than just healing. I also don't think making healers do damage is the answer either. Healers like to heal but should feel like they have powerful options in PvP. And I really hope Blizzard stops neglecting the tanks. I think it's wasted potential to have all the tanks packs basically just pushed out of PvP. There's a lot of fun to be had there, and tanks could have a balanced, good position in the PvP meta. In any case, peeps, I really hope you've enjoyed this little video. Like, comment, subscribe, all those things YouTuber wants you to do, and have a nice day.